The Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, when he did turn up last night, there was a real feeling that he is on his sort of last warning. And I think it will be what the SNP does next will determine really whether or not he can survive.
Now, we've been looking for two things this morning: a sense of who is to blame for the chaos on the Commons, and also to find out if anyone actually takes responsibility. But predictably, we've heard more on the blame side so far. Let's go through this, shall we? The Health Minister, Maria Caulfield, told us that the Speaker was wrong to go against the advice of his clerks.
I think the Speaker recognises, he apologised to the House of Commons for the way things panned out, and he recognises that by changing the way the votes were going to be taken against the clear advice of the Clerk of the House of Commons, he got that wrong. The SNP, to be fair to them, only get 3 Opposition Day debates in a session. This was one of their rare chances to put their motion on the order paper and to have a vote on an issue which everyone cares passionately about. And the Speaker recognises by changing that and allowing a Labour amendment first so they wouldn't get a vote on their motion has really done a huge amount of damage to Parliament.
So the government's position is the Speaker's fault. The SNP MP Richard Thompson blamed the Speaker as well, but he felt in fairly strident terms that Labour was in the wrong for putting so much pressure on him.
Because of the way the Speaker chose to ignore the very clear advice he was given by the clerks, because of the way the Labour Party chose not to engage with other parties in the chamber to accommodate their unique perspective on this, we've ended up with Keir Starmer and his Chief Whip putting pressure in an unprecedented and frankly disgraceful manner on the Speaker.
So that was the SNP, but Labour's Pat McFadden, National Campaigns Coordinator, told us the Speaker was justified to let all 3 positions be heard.
When the Speaker took that decision, he had every right and expectation to think that all 3 of them would be voted on. Now, this is a bit arcane, but the reason that didn't happen was because the Tories took the decision shortly before the vote to pull their proposition and not have a vote on it. And that is what triggered the chaos, because that's what meant that the SNP proposition would no longer be voted on. Now, that's not the Speaker's fault.
The Times' Times Radio's political editor, Kate McCann, was there watching it all unfold, and we can speak to her now. Good morning to you, Kate.
Morning.
What is the situation, first of all? Maybe we could work our way backwards, actually. The Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, there are, I think, 40 people who've signed some motion or some letter saying that they don't have confidence in him. Is he in danger of losing his job?
Yeah, so there's an early day motion, which is another one of those slightly odd parliamentary terms, but what it really means is it's a petition. It doesn't have any actual sort of weight. It can't actually trigger anything, but it's a way for MPs to indicate their upset. So Will Wragg, a Tory MP, put that down last night, saying that this House does not have confidence in the Speaker. Now, at the moment, it has around 33 MPs, Tory and SNP, signed up to that motion. Now, if the House of Commons, if the Leader of the House of Commons, Penny Mordaunt, and the government's Chief Whip decided they wanted to give time in the House to debate that, they could. So that would be the next step to actually get rid of the Speaker. Question is, where are we on that journey? Well, I think I was in the chamber last night, as you mentioned. I've never seen it like that. I mean, even in the Brexit years, I think it didn't quite touch where we were yesterday.
Dear.
I think the Deputy Speaker, Rosie Winterton, who was, unfortunately for her, in the chair at the time, completely lost the confidence and lost control of the House of Commons almost entirely. MPs were walking out, they were shouting, they were talking over her. And, you know, we can laugh about whether or not that kind of thing matters, but if Parliament can't conduct itself in a reasonable way, that can lead to some really worrying accusations, including one from Chris Bryant, Labour MP, who said if the government can't control this House, we should have a general election now. So I think the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, when he did turn up last night, there was a real feeling that he is on his sort of last warning. And I think it will be what the SNP does next will determine really whether or not he can survive. He's going to have meetings today with all of the leaders of the parties and the whips, but crucially, the moment to watch in the Commons today is around 10:30, which is business questions, unless we get an urgent question before. And that will be the moment when Tory MPs will probably stand up and say, we don't have confidence and we want him out. If Penny Mordaunt, who will be there, judges that mood is shifting, she may well face no other option but to give that time in Parliament.
Everyone we've spoken to this morning has a different view, Kate. Of course they do, about when this started to go wrong, when it started to unravel. Now, Labour, of course, are saying that happened when the Conservatives said that they didn't want to get involved and they wouldn't vote. Other people are saying, well, it all started to unravel when Lindsay Hoyle wanted to kind of air all the motions and amendments. In your opinion, where did it start to unravel?
Yeah, I think this is the most important question, because what we have to do is go back and work out what everybody's motivations were yesterday for doing what they did. You've spoken to the SNP about what their motivations were for calling the debate in the first place, and we can all judge for ourselves whether or not it was about the strength of feeling on Gaza, or whether it was about trying to trip Labour up, or whether it might have been about both. I think where this becomes problematic is what the Speaker's motivation was for allowing Labour to do something very unusual, really doesn't ever happen in Parliament, which was to have their amendment selected yesterday. Now, Pat McFadden confirmed to you that the Labour leader and the Chief Whip did meet with the Speaker, and there have been some really worrying accusations about pressure put on the Speaker, denied, I have to say, by both Labour and the Speaker's office, about sort of threats to him. But if you take it back to the beginning and you ask, what's the Speaker's motivation for allowing Labour to do that? The Speaker says it's about threats, and that if he hadn't, there would have been some very worrying threats to MPs. I would suggest, and others are too, including names in the government talking to me last night, that allowing the threat of violence against MPs, allowing the will of a mob of people, quite an angry mob of people at times, to determine what happens in Parliament is quite a dangerous precedent to set. And that has actually really worried some people. Now, there is a careful balance, and the Speaker has experience of MPs being threatened and being, having their lives taken from them. Most parliamentarians do. They've been around to experience what that's like firsthand. Nobody wants that to happen. But I think the motivation for allowing that Labour amendment yesterday is where we really need to ask those questions, and whether there could have been another way for Labour to navigate yesterday without that.
Very interesting. Kate, thank you very much. That is Times Radio's political editor, Kate McCann.